Welcome friends to the second lecture on Balzac, the short story writer and novelist, and we've been discussing his short story El Verdugo, translated as The Executioner, and in the previous lecture we had discussed how the style of realism evolved in the 19th century and was reflected in Balzac's writing. So the short story as a genre, as a subgenre, evolved in the 19th century through this realist mode of writing. So far, in the short story El Verdugo, we discussed how the calm, the silence, the festivities, everything comes to end, and there is been an insurrection. The French soldiers have been killed by the Spaniards. So, the silence of death, it's said in the story, broken only by moans, succeeded to the sounds of a festival. In all of this, a character who stands out is Clara. In fact, throughout this short story, Clara stands out as a brave woman, and a woman with dignity, a woman with honor. And she is somebody who, in a sense, her act of bravery surpasses what one can say are the boundaries of nationhood, because she goes up to Victor Marchand and she tells him, "Fly. My brothers are following me to kill you. Your soldiers are killed. Escape yourself. At the foot of the rock over there, see, you will find Juanito's barb. Go." Now, Juanito is her brother. So she asks him to go there. So he goes there. And from there, he goes back to the general. And the general, who's leading the French army, is surprised. Now, here, he's the only survivor. A question that can be asked at this point is that what if Victor Marchand had not survived? What if he had been killed? What would have happened then? There would be nobody to tell the story to the general. And maybe the French would have gone back, maybe not. We don't know. But what has happened here is that Clara saved Victor Marchand's life. And so, the general at this point is, because, for a soldier to actually, run away is also something that's not part of their code. But here, he's also a survivor. So he goes up to the general and, he's worried that some action might be taken against him. But the general says that no, not another word of this, except to turn it into a vengeance which shall impress with salutary terror a people who make war like savages. Now, we have the French occupation with, which the story begins. The people of Spain respond to this by killing the French soldiers and seizing Menda, getting their own town back. And now, absolute horror and violence is going to be unleashed on Menda. So, an entire regiment, cavalry, the battery of artillery, they all march to Menda, and the soldiers have already been told about the gruesome way in which the French soldiers had been killed. So the regiment is all absolutely charged to inflict violence on the people of Menda. Now, Victor Marchand, who has conveyed everything, is also worried. He has to turn this, as per the code, into a matter of honor for himself. But at the same time, we also notice a streak of humanity that is there in Victor, something that is, grossly missing in the general. So the soldiers were told about, the massacre of the comrades, and they were very angry, and so they covered this distance very quickly so that, they could reach Menda. And on reaching the town of Menda, the people were very, very disappointed meanwhile, the people of Menda, that is, because they had thought that the British fleet was going to support them. for some reason, this support does not arrive on the ground, and Menda was surrounded by the French troops. So the confidence of the Spanish people, of the people of Menda, was totally, it just totally crashed. And so the people of Menda then decided that they are just going to submit to the French so that the destruction is minimal. And the people of the town, seized with terror, they offered to surrender completely. So the slayers of the French soldiers, they were scared that, the cruelty of their commander, that Menda would be, totally burnt, and the population would be decimated. So, they decided to negotiate with the general. And the members of the Leganés family, their servants, they were all bound, their hands were tied, they were kept under guard. And it is at this point, a lot of the other Spaniards are killed. 200 Spaniards who had delivered themselves up were immediately shot. And the general ordered many gibbets, to be planted on the terrace, so that all the members of the Leganés family could be publicly hanged. And so the executioner of the town was sent for. So we know the executioner here is the person who's going to execute the hanging. But is the executioner going to do this, or is there somebody else in this story who performs this task? And that is where the story takes a very, very dark turn. At this point, the Marquis who had set up the gibbets, he says that, you should behead the family, as befits the nobility. So the Marquis actually communicates to the general through Victor, and he asks for three things. The first thing he says is that they should be beheaded as it befits the nobility and not hanged. So the second is that they ask for religious assistance and they want to be released from their bonds. And they also make a commitment that they are not going to run away, they are not going to escape. So here, the French writer Balzac, who looks at Catholicism and the monarchy as two very significant pillars for the betterment of society, here when he depicts everything objectively, he critiques war, he critiques the position that is taken by this general. So, and it is the Spanish people, it's the Spaniards who stand out and, for their honor. So, and that of course tells us about the way in which the author is depicting everything in a very, very objective manner. And in doing so, one is of course critical of the way in which the general deals with everyone, that is the French general, and at the same time, one is very critical of this idea of war itself. So, an invasion, of annexation. So they ask for religious assistance and to be released from their bonds. The third thing that the Marquis asks for is, he says he will give up his entire fortune if only one of his sons, he has 3 sons, he says only if one of the sons is pardoned, then the entire fortune will be given. So, he says the general's response here is almost heartbreaking, because one looks at how dark things have become and how, there is absolutely no shred of humanity left in this general, because he agrees to these 3 conditions and his 3 requests rather, and he says, however, he has one condition, and it is only if this condition is fulfilled will the general accept the 3 requests that have been made by the Leganés family, that's the Marquis. And here what he says is that he will give life to one of the sons of the Leganés family, but that son will have to perform the office of the executioner on the rest. And he says this is going to be non-negotiable. To quote from the story, well, He shall buy the continuance of his name and lineage, but Spain shall forever connect with it the memory of his treachery and his punishment. I will give life and his whole fortune to whichever of his sons will perform the office of executioner on the rest. Go, not another word to me on the subject. So, what can be more cruel than this? That the son is being asked to take the life of the entire family, to be the executioner to the family, and to then rule Menda, it's a town, rule Menda with this heavy load on his chest. So, this is for the general his victory, and this is as cruel as he can get. So, in a sense, this aspect of violence, of invasion, during Napoleon's time, has completely divested the general of any humanity. And this, leads the reader to ask, if this was really worth it. And so, this tells us about how Balzac is very, very critical, despite the fact that, he's a French writer and upholds the monarchy and so on. In his writing, the stance that emerges is very different from what he lays out in the author's introduction some years later. In these short stories also, and there are many other short stories which, follow a similar line, he is very, very critical of this kind of violence that dehumanizes people. So, now there were these three brothers, and so the eldest was about 30 years of age, and his name is Juanito, and he's also, somebody who's endowed with the Spanish chivalry, is what he was famous for. The second son is Felipe, and he's about 20 years of age, and the youngest was 8. So, this act is now, given to the eldest son, that is Juanito. So, Juanito is going to be the executioner on behalf of the French for his entire family, and the youngest being 8 years. So, a painter, of course, the story tells us, would have given to the, features of Manuelo a little of the Roman constancy and so on. The head of the old Marquis, was covered with white hair, and he quivered with hope. And when the Marquis's wife, when she gets to know, she quivers with hope, but when she gets to know that the life of one son depends on this horrible act of cruelty, she collapses. But in this situation, the woman who stands up and makes a statement of honor is Clara. Because according to Clara, in any case, everyone is going to die. So if by performing this act, if Juanito gets to live, then it is enough for the family to continue. Juanito, on his part, is shocked at hearing this offer and the fact that it is now his job to actually kill his entire family. So he feels, the story tells us, he feels bounded like a lion in his cage. Clara's bravery stands out, and she addresses her brother and she says, "If you knew how sweet death would seem to me if given by you, think, I should be spared the odious touch of an executioner. You would save me from all the woes that await me. And oh, dear Juanito, you would not have me belong to anyone, therefore." So, in this situation also, Clara has been able to convince Juanito that death is going to be sweet if it is given by the brother. The father too commands his son and says that, he commands him to obey. He has no choice but to give in to the request made by the family, because if Juanito does not become the executioner, then nobody from the family will survive. And they all It's this moment when they all stretch out their hands to Juanito to save the family from extinction that is absolutely moving. And not only is it moving because of the way the family stands together to allow the family to continue, to prevent the family from becoming extinct. At the same time, it is the code of honor as far as the Spanish people are concerned. It's their code of honor that stands out. And the French in this case are portrayed in a very negative light as the general, is absolutely cruel and is not going to negotiate on this particular aspect. But even from the French side, as Balzac does not, kind of pass judgment on anyone, it is Victor. He too is a French soldier, but he still possesses humanity, and he's the one who negotiates. He also requests the general to allow him to marry Clara, so that at least Clara can live. And after the father pleads to the son and says that, he should not leave him anymore on his knees and he should agree to conduct the execution. It is when the execution of the Leganés family is being conducted, and it is being done publicly. All the people of Menda, they come to the terrace to see, the execution of the Leganés family. And how does the story describe them? Balzac describes them as serene and calm. The entire Leganés family, they appear stoic in the face of this kind of disaster that is looking at them in the face. They know that their life is going to be taken away, and more so that it is their own, one of their own, who is going to be asked to be executing them. So the confessor turned the victims so that they do not see the fatal blows, but like true Spaniards, they stood erect without faltering. At this point, one is almost compelled to ask what Balzac thinks of the French and what he thinks of the Spanish. Now, Balzac, this writes in 1829. Verdugo is a story that is written around 1829. But he's looking back at that period of the Peninsular War, not just to elaborate what the French did, but or the way in which the honor of the Spaniards stands out, but also to condemn war, to condemn this kind of violence that is perpetrated. And it is here that he maintains complete objectivity as a writer. So, Clara in fact comes forward and she says, "Juanito, have pity on my want of courage, begin with me." So, is it want of courage? In fact, it is the reverse. She is courageous enough to go to Juanito and offers herself and says that please begin with me. And it is at this point, when Clara is already, her right neck has been bared for the scimitar, that Victor Marchand appears, and he's already taken permission from the general so that he can marry Clara. But Clara's response, again, it reflects on the honor and the courage of this woman. And in the 19th century, in a story that is about war, in a story that is about two warring factions, Balzac has invested courage and honor in a woman. And this is the greatness of this writer. So the general grants your life if you will marry me, Victor says to Clara. The Spanish girl cast upon the officer a look of pride and contempt. So there is pride and there is contempt, and she says, "Go on, Juanito," she said in a deep voice, and her head rolled at Victor's feet. So, once this execution is done, it draws our attention to something that is absolutely almost macabre. One looks at this dreadful sight, and in this again, the violence that was executed by the French is something that the writer presents to us to be condemned. So, if we look at the little Manuelo asks Juanito, and this is, again, it really, really touches the heart when he asks, "Am I placed right this way, my good Juanito?" So even this little brother, right from Manuelo to Juanito, we see only courage in the Spaniards at that point of time during the Peninsular War. So, the sister turns around and, when she's crying, Juanito asks that, "You're weeping." She says, "Yes, because I think of you, my poor Juanito, how lonely you will be without us." This again absolutely pierces the heart, and one really thinks, where does this kind of courage come? It comes with faith in oneself, in one's dignity and integrity. So, when Juanito sees the mother, at that point of time he loses courage and he says he cannot execute the mother, "She bore me." The mother, on her part, saves him the execution, and she jumps from the parapet, and she dies. She just falls on the rocks below and she dies. Juanito, after the execution is complete, he just falls, collapses. But he is now, in a sense, the ruler of Menda. So there is a drunk officer from the French who asks Marchand, he says, "Marchand has just told me the particulars of the execution. I will bet you never ordered it." The officer, who is drunk, has made a statement that is revelatory. And the general says that, well, so many French families are plunged in affliction and we are in Spain. Do you want us to leave our bones in its soil? So, it is with this that we realize that Balzac has, in this story, given the strongest condemnation of war. And the final character, that is the one who survives, that is El Verdugo, he is referred to as the executioner. He becomes the king of Spain, bestowed as a title of nobility on the Marquis. He is a prey to sorrow. He lives in solitude and he is overwhelmed with the burden of his crime, and he only awaits the birth of a second son, which will give him the right to rejoin the shades that accompany him. So, it is this kind of writing that we look at, the writing that is objective, writing that also conveys a very, very real situation to its readers and allows the reader to discuss, to ask questions. Questions such as, did the French do the correct thing? What are the options that they have? Why did, the killing of the Spaniards have to be so gruesome? Could nobody have been spared? So, these are the questions that are to be asked, and Balzac takes us through this conflict to reveal, in a sense, how this kind of gruesome killing through war, expansion, leads to absolutely nothing. So this is a kind of story that Balzac wrote in the early 19th century, and which is why he's not just a great novelist. As mentioned, he started with writing short stories, and his short stories, of course, familiarize the reader with the realist style. So I hope that this story raises a lot of questions in your mind about realism, about 19th century writing, and about the issues that Balzac has raised in El Verdugo. Thank you, friends.